Okay, so we're going to go over, we're going to recap from yesterday, but I just want to add to our notes today so we can reference it. So if you go to your notes, we are today going to talk about inputting, and I'll make this bigger, maybe. Inputting integers. And doubles. That's what our notes are going to be for today. It's going to be really easy. Nothing major. So yesterday we talked about using a scanner. So for integers and doubles, we still need to use a scanner. So we still need to use a scanner. And that will make sense if you weren't here yesterday. We're going to recap anyway. And if you don't remember from yesterday, we will refresh your memory. So we still need to use a scanner variable. But when we read in, for a integer, int, or double, we use a different code than next or next line. So yesterday we used next or next line when we read in that string. So for integers, we're going to use something called, wait for it, it's pretty exciting. It's really inventive. The people who created Java are geniuses at naming. Next, capital I, int. Oof. Yep. So if we know we have to read in an integer, we're going to have to use next ints to read that in. And this will allow us, so I'm commenting, allow us to read in a number value. So like if we're doing, if we needed to do calculations. So yesterday when we practiced doing a string, we could input numbers, but it was just reading it as like a character. It wasn't actually reading it as a value of like 1 or 4. So you couldn't do any calculations with it. But for this, you will be able to. It will read it as an actual value. So if we needed to multiply 4 times 5, it could then output 20. So. Okay. And then for doubles, which are, if you guys remember, doubles are anything with decimals. And I'm going to put that in parentheses. If we have anything with a decimal in it, we're going to use doubles. And they too are very smart in their naming. And it's going to be next, capital D, double. Open and closing parentheses, semicolon. And this, allows us to read in a double number value. Nothing too earth-shattering here. But necessary. All these rules for coding. I think somebody asked me, why is this so hard? It's like learning a foreign language. I would guess when you guys first started learning Spanish, it was hard. I think it's still hard. I do not speak any Spanish. So I'm sure it's hard to keep up with Senora Bauer when she starts talking. So it's a lot like, coding is a lot like that. There's certain words we have to learn, certain techniques. And actually they are saying that someday computer programming will be considered like a requirement, like a language is a requirement for school.
They're trying to pass that at the state level.
Are they? Excellent.
So it'll count as a foreign language.
That's cool.
Credit. No, they have it in a lot of other states already. So we're all, of course, behind the times.
Of course. I was just telling that a friend of mine lives in DC, and I'm like, oh, we're going to be like 10 years behind that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just keep this in mind when we're talking today about actually reading in that code that the user inputs. We need to remember next or next line for strings, next int for integers, and next double for floats or double numbers. So it's getting a little mathy. You got to kind of remember that doubles have decimals, or they're called floats. So, we kind of use those terms interchangeably, but you just got to also consider if you know it's going to have a decimal, you're going to want to use a double. If you're sure it's always going to be a whole number, like if you're just doing straight multiplication with straight whole numbers, you can use next int. But if you're doing like any calculations where you're dividing, or the person might have a decimal point when they input it in, you're going to want to just anticipate for the user and for your code and use doubles. And that's okay if you use doubles instead of answer, just to be safe. Better to be safe than sorry and have an error. You guys all know when you're a user and you get an error and you're like, what's wrong with this program? So sometimes you have to anticipate user error, or users are going to put things in that maybe you're not intending. That's the interesting part about coding is not only do you have to code well, but you also have to anticipate what your users are going to do. And so you got to think of like the lowest level user sometimes. So it's like when you're trying to explain how to use your phone maybe to your parents, although your parents are probably pretty savvy, tech savvy. You kind of have to think of that when you're coding. I know when I code, I have to think of if my parents were using this or needing some kind of output, what would they expect? So they're my lowest level of technology users. In fact, like my dad still has a flip phone, so it's kind of, I think he's like the only one. AT&T keeps calling me and they're like, he should upgrade. I'm like, no, he can't even get his voicemails out. So, although he just figured out how to read his text, so at least he can read it, he just can't respond. Anywho, so that's how we are going to look at reading in our lines for today. So if you guys wouldn't mind, I'm going to kind of, maybe I'm just going to move this down. Oops, move this down. So we can kind of reference back to it if you need to. But I'm going to now go to repel it. So you will probably want to go there. And we're going to go to the practice. And if I need to slow down, let me know. I kind of just drank some coffee, so I'm kind of on a caffeine kick right now, so. And it's gonna be, it's gonna be right before greeter. It's gonna be right above greeter, so you're gonna have to scroll down. I know, I wish this program would let me kind of archive old assignments, but unfortunately it does not.
It's right above the practice.
Yep. So there should be two practices kind of by each other. I think it'll be right above greet. I'm hoping you guys have similar looking screens. It's good, I know, and it doesn't even show the whole name. So it's P3 practice, the second one. And it's not hugely important that you guys use my practice. I just want to give you an area that's fresh and new, and that you could reference back to. So, all right. So yesterday we talked about input. And input and output. And we introduced two new libraries or two new ways of getting methods that we can use in our program. So if you guys can remember, does anyone remember what we had to put at the very top of our program before the class main? Or is it completely gone?
The Java library things.
Okay, excellent. So Java libraries. What was, can somebody give me one? It was import.
I'm on my way. One second.
If you don't, I mean, you don't have to dig for it. I just was like, if.
The utility thing.
Yep, excellent. So Java. That. Utility, or in this case, we abbreviate it, so it's util. Mm-hmm. So import Java util, and then don't forget you have to have a period at the end, and then an asterisk, or a star, and a semicolon. And then the other one was an import Java IO. That IO, period, asterisk, semicolon. Yeah. Those are it. Can you guys see okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
it is important that it looks, I mean, it doesn't matter which one is first. It's just important that you have both of those, because the scanner and the read lines, like the next line, need both of those. Otherwise, it won't recognize those words. And so we're just saying, hey, we need to borrow information so that way we can run our program. And it's unique to Java. Okay. So very important that we have those two whenever we're doing input and output. So, I mean, that's awesome that you guys remember that we needed them. So, okay. So after that, we needed to go inside of our driving function. So let me go in there and hit return, get some white space. And I'm gonna actually delete this hello world, because we are past that. And we need to declare our scanner. So if you remember, scanner is basically an input variable. It's something that we can declare, so that way when it reads in the line, it creates a variable that's gonna store our input. So we need capital S, scanner, and then you can name it whatever you want, as long as it's not the word scanner, main, public, class, import, Java. So you gotta kind of be careful of what you're naming your variables. It's good to be descriptive. It's good to make sure it's all one word. You could be I've got programmers that are very cryptic and they just use like A1, A2, which works too. I like to be a little bit more descriptive with my variables so I know what it's doing, but you can just use a single letter and it doesn't have to be the letter S. It can just be Z if you want to be random. So it's up to you. All right, so I'm going to use, I like to use reader as my scanner variable. And then we need an equal sign, new, and then capital scanner, open parenthesis, and then inside those parentheses, system dot in. And then make sure this is a line that our computer needs to read or our code needs to process and do. So we need a semicolon at the end. So again, the semicolon says, hey program, this is the code you need to run or execute. So that's why we need those semicolons. So again, this just says, when I call upon my variable reader, it's going to scan an input, a system input, and that's basically the user input. So we're just declaring it and saying what it's going to do when we use it. So it's kind of like if you think in terms of, I don't know, like a sport. Maybe in baseball, you might say, hey, Darren is a pitcher, but even though he's sitting on the bench, but he knows he needs to pitch. So when we call upon him to be in the game, he's going to be ready to go and he knows what he needs to do. Same thing with variables. They're kind of sitting there waiting, and then when we call upon them, they have specific roles. And then this specific variable called reader is waiting to be used to scan in information. Okay, so there's my my scanner, and then let's just do a simple input, string input. So we need a system out because we need to prompt the user, system out, print line, and then I'll let you guys decide what you want to ask the user. You can make your decision here. So system print line, and I'm going to say, how old are you? Or I might say, maybe not age. Let's do, actual word. Who are you? And then remember, you need a semicolon at the end. So this prompts the user. Oops. User. And then we need to read in what our user is going to put in. So this is where we create another variable. This is a string. I'm going to say my input equals the reader or the scanner variable, which is minus reader. I can spell that. It is a string, so I need to use, I'll just use next line, open and closing parens, semicolon. So I know it's a string because I'm using next line, and I'm assigning it to a new variable called my input, and it's reading it in because I use the input variable. Okay. So I'm going to also put a comma here, input. Okay, so now we're just going to do a simple output. So I know it worked. System, that out, that print line. And I'm just gonna print out what the user inputted. So I might just put my input. That's a basic spit out whatever it inputted in. So basic output. Okay. So run it, see if you get any errors. Fingers crossed. Hopefully I didn't spell anything wrong. It's very likely I do. Ooh, hey, who are you? Oops. Sorry, guys. Got so many applications here going on. No one. And it spits it right back out. Perfect. Questions, again, about string input. You got an error?
What's that? We are supposed to. Oh, and she has it. What? No one.
So guys, again, in my code, reader, the word reader is just a variable. So it could be a letter. I'm just going to show you guys just to show you. It could be the letter R. Those are just the variable. Same with string, my input. My input is just a variable. It's just a like a folder holding whatever's being read in. So you just gotta, I know variables can kind of sometimes be confusing, especially when we have multiple ones, but they're just holding places. Remember, don't use any, whenever you're naming variables, don't use any spaces. Or I would say stay away from dashes as well. I don't mind if you use like an underscore, which is like you might do an underscore R span, maybe. That's okay. But you really want to stay away from fancy characters. It's just better to have all one word. So. How are we doing? Good?
Dan still has an error.
Who does? If you want to take a screenshot, I can take a look too. Sometimes two eyes are better than, or two sets of eyes are better than one, or three sets of eyes, or four sets of eyes. Sometimes it's hard to find errors. Trust me, it can drive you crazy. I mean, I do like you guys struggling a little when you're trying to find your error, because I think it's important that you guys self-correct, but at the same time, if you ever have an error and you're just not sure, it's okay. Don't feel like you can't email me if you're working on this at home or at school or whatever. I may be kind of snarky about it, but it doesn't mean I'm mad at you or anything. And again, if you guys, I mean, right now it's it's a little bit easier, but when you guys start coding, like if I had you guys do a big assignment, it's good to take it in parts. So like if I first asked you in a code to input the user's name, test that out first before you start asking the user to input numbers or their phone number or, like multiple things. Just because it could just be a spelling error on the first line or a semicolon or the wrong character. So how many of you now want to be computer programmers? Hopefully you're all like, I love looking at lines of code. I'm sure you're so excited.
Livy is.
I know, that's what gets her up in the morning. She springs out of bed and says, it's coding, first hour, I can't wait. Yep. She realizes that she's just about ready to miss first hour, and it dawns on her. So.
It's pretty simple. Like you get that, so that's when you don't show up.
I don't know why I'm getting error, so I'm good at this. Okay.
You're more than welcome to send a screenshot. I mean, really, it could just be.
Keep going though.
Okay, it's okay. I mean, folks, it can happen to any of you. It happens to me all the time. Like sometimes I just can't. I don't see it either. So don't feel bad. It happens. So, okay, I'm going to keep this up. If you guys want to, I would put a comment maybe at the top of this section and just put input strings, so that way you guys know that that's what that section of code is. But I'm actually going to send that to the bottom of my code, so that way you can see new stuff. Okay? So you can give yourself some white space. This way you can reference back to this if you need to. Maybe in your notes you put a little side note that says, hey, check out practice 327. And it's going to have all the examples. Or if you're somebody that likes to copy and paste, you can always copy and paste your whole code, whatever works for you. Okay, so this example, we are going to input, we're going to input an integer. So we're actually going to input some values. So I'm going to put a comment and say input integers. Since this isn't a new program, we don't need to put another import Java libraries, but we do. Oh, we don't need to put those since we're using the same program, but we would if this was a completely new program. But we are going to, at least in this case, we're going to create a new scanner. So let's do scanner. And I'm going to call mine read int. Okay, I'm just declaring a new variable that's going to read my integer in. Okay. You could say RI, you could say R, just as long as it's not the same variable that you used for the string. All right, so read int equals new scanner. And it's going to be system.in, and then semicolon at the end. And I'm just going to say it's declaring new scanner variable. Like I said, I like my variables to be descriptive, so I know that this variable is going to read in the integer, but you don't need to be that descriptive if you don't want to be. And then now, like always, now that we've declared our scanner or our input variable, we need to ask the user a question or prompt them to respond. So system.out.println, and you can ask them for an integer. Enter your integer here. And semicolon. And because it's an int, we're not going to need to declare an integer. So this is where declaring an integer variable, int. And I'm going to be very stealth-like and call my integer variable with the letter I equals. And I need to now call upon my scanner variable, which is called readInt. And I need to say, hey, what am I reading in? Next int. So not next line, but next int, because it's an integer. And it's a value. Semicolon. Since it's an integer, we need to use next int, and we need to assign it to an integer variable called I, or whatever you want your integer variable to be called. It could be the letter A, it could be the letter. Okay. And then I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to output it. So system.out.print line. And for this example, for right now, I'm just going to do a simple output, and I'm just going to return the value that was given to me. Okay. So I'm just going to comment while you guys type. Okay, so let's run this. Are we ready? Fingers crossed, no errors. I'm going to move this up a little bit. It should ask me, enter your integer. I'm going to enter 301. And then it spits it back out. And because I have the other code for string right below it, it's going to ask me like who I am. And it's going to spit that out. But it should, most importantly, guys, it should ask for an integer, and then, at least in this example, spit the same answer out. Guys and gals. So hopefully you don't get any errors with this part. How are we doing?
We got a couple of errors.
Okay. I know, I wish I could see your guys' screens easily. Although maybe not. I know maybe you wouldn't want me to, but it would be helpful, I'm sure, to have more eyes looking. Sometimes you just got to go line through line. I mean, if you didn't have any errors with the strings, you know it's got to probably be something with your integer, the stuff that you just put in. So make sure your comments are in green. Make sure you have your quotation marks in the right spot. I will say if your error if it tells you kind of what line it is, it gives you a little clue sometimes. Make sure system is spelled correctly. I always misspell that one for some reason. Make sure things are capitalized if they need to be.
Darren just had some line errors. I think I'm going through line by line.
I know it's hard. When I type, I'm a horrible typer, so I always misspell stuff. Yep. So it's good to kind of understand, like, well, at least, I mean, it does usually help if you start at the top of your error line. And like I said, guys, sometimes if it's just, even if you have like 20 errors, but at the top line it tells you where it's starting, sometimes that fixes it. I know. Sometimes it could just be a semicolon. And we only have like 20 lines. I mean, wait till you guys get into some bigger projects where you might have 50, 100 lines of code. So there's been... There has been many times in college where I would spend days looking at my code, so. Looking for errors.
Why did she get it?
She named her.
I know, I wish this program would show you guys like things that I've named personally. So like read int is totally my own variable name. Same with int I is my own. So you can change those things up. So if yours is working, it might be a good time to kind of go through and maybe do some comments so you remember. So like you might even put up here, necessary input, output. Also, while you wait, if you look at your input integer section here now, right now we just did a simple input output, but now you might say, hey, once that person inputs an integer, I want to actually do some calculations. So before, I said the difference between next int and next line was that one was a string, one was an integer. And when we look at inputting a number, we really want to think about the value of the number. And so for integers, we're going to think about the value, and we might actually say, now we're going to input the value and manipulate it or change it or do some kind of calculation. So you could say, I want to multiply it by 3. So in coding, to multiply, you would use the little asterisk or the star, and then you could multiply it by 3 and put a 3 in there. Or 10 or 5,672. Make sure you're not using a double, so make sure you're not using something with a decimal, otherwise it won't work because it's only an integer. But if you run that, you should also then get, what is your integer? You might say 10, and it will multiply your input by 3 and give you 30. And if you guys ever find that for some reason you're not getting an error, but it keeps running and it's not showing what it needs to, you can always stop your program. So when you hit run, you can also stop it, which is nice. Because sometimes your program will just run forever if it's not coded right. And if you want to get fancy, you might say you might do a better output than what I just did and put some content or put some text in there and say your input was maybe I, and then you might do a plus sign. Remember, a plus sign is just to kind of add, not necessarily add values, at least at this point, but add words. So your input was I, then you might say, and multiplied by 3, your result is I times 3. So you can use your input multiple times. So for this example, I put your input was, and I'm going to spit out whatever the user's input was, which was the letter I, and multiplied by 3, your result is, and at the very end, I do the calculation, I times 3.
Wow. Wow.
And hopefully you don't get errors. Make sure you're using proper quotation marks. Anything that you want to print out as words, you use open and closing quotations. I'm going to run just to show you. Hopefully I don't have errors. It could happen. There you go. So enter your integer here. Your input was 10. Looks like I need a better space between that. And multiply 3, your result is 30. So how are we doing? I added some text, so it gave my user a better idea of what I was doing with the input. very rarely are you just going to get a simple input-output for a program. And I could break this up in multiple lines. I mean, right now it's just one giant output line, but I could have different system out print lines to kind of break it up if I wanted to. But
can you scroll to the right again? Because I'm just trying to type it.
Yep.
No.
So in this one, I told the user what their input was just to verify. And then I said what I was going to be doing. I was going to multiply it by 3, and then that was the result. So if you think of it as kind of like an ATM, where your ATM might say, you just, like you withdrew $300 to kind of spit out the information back to you. But they do it to kind of verify as well. Or at least as a user, you're like, oh yeah, that's the amount I put in. So, I mean, is it sort of starting to sink in, the use of these variables and reading in input and the kind of pattern you need as far as declaring a scanner, prompting your user, reading in the input, and then creating an output? For those of you who are able to get, I'm going to just move this back over. If you are able to get an input integers, you guys can create more white space or more space in your program, and you can try to do something with doubles. So if you're good with integers, you're going to just kind of replicate the same thing, but now you're going to do doubles. But that's only if you got no errors with input integers. Then you can move on to doubles. So you can do it at the top, at the bottom, whatever's better for you. But you could do input doubles. And then just do new code for inputting a double. And that would be using decimal points. So declare a new scanner, prompt your user, declare a double variable, and then output that double variable. And guys, I know I had an assignment due today. We can always have it due on Thursday or work on it after the quiz tomorrow. If Luke, I know you're not going to be here tomorrow. You can work on it when you get back. I mean, you don't need to take your computer if you don't for this class. I mean, don't feel like you need to do that unless you want to study. But
I am going to be here tomorrow as well.
Okay.
I'm not.
So, I mean, I'm more than happy to be a little bit flexible. I want you guys to get this, so we don't need to rush by any means.
Can you teach us how to hack Wi-Fi passwords? You know, so I do that.
No, I
Is that
can't.
like possible? Do you actually
Yes.
know how to hack Wi-Fi passwords?
Yep. Anything's possible. I mean, come on. You can hack
Well,
anything.
you know how to do it though?
I have not tried it, but I did take a class on hacking. So when I was in college.
Why do they teach that? Dude.
And that was our final was to hack into our professor's computer.
That's funny.
Yo, what? Yo, I didn't learn how to do that. That's a life skill.
It's also very legal. Yep. Even attempting to, guys, is illegal. So, and it actually is a federal crime because you're using probably a server that's not in your area. So be aware. The attempt can be a federal offense.
A federal?
Yes, because like, for example, if you were, let's say, well, you're using your computer and you're probably using some type of server or hacking into some type of server or some type of federal regulated, especially with Wi-Fi, that's federally regulated. But anytime, like, let's say you're trying to hack in to the school server, they might have some type of offshoot server, like out of state. That would be a federal offense because it's out of state. You know, like banks, same thing. I mean, we live in a very global world. So, and you leave a trail.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
You leave a huge trail unless you're really good. But nothing's completely gone. Even if you clear your history, nothing's completely gone. So your computer can betray you because you have crumbs that you leave. But there are competitions where big companies will have huge amounts of money.
Test their security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, a lot of times, like when Microsoft comes out with something new, they sometimes, have like a dummy type thing where they have a huge competition to see who can hack into it. As part of their security. I mean.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's usually a pretty large amount of money that you can get.
Money?
Yeah, they usually have a reward or some type of, if you're able to. And for some people's jobs, that's all they do. It's network security and software security.
Yeah.
And they're looking for holes. Pretty much you can assume whenever something new comes out, there's probably like over 1 million people trying to hack into it and find holes. So like when Microsoft comes out with, or Windows comes out with a Windows 11 or whatever, you can pretty much assume it's already been hacked and there's quite a bit of holes in it. That's why they always do updates. Why do you think they make updates for everything? Somebody has gotten in. All right, guys, how are we doing with integers? Earth to class. How are we doing with the integers?
Darren's gonna have to send you a screenshot because I couldn't figure out.
Okay. All right.
Code wasn't working.
Sure.
3 of us finished it and we still can't figure it out.
Okay. While we wait, though, you guys can work on doubles. So again, declare a scanner. Declare a variable for that. Maybe you just use SD for scanner double. Equals new scanner system in semicolon. I'm going to prompt my user system.out.print 9. Enter. Say double. You could say double number or enter a double or a decimal. Semicolon, and then you can say int. Oh, it's a double, so double. I'm going to use D. I'm pretty sophisticated here. Equals the name of my scanner, SD. Next double. And output system. Out. Print. 9. Maybe I actually tell the user your double or decimal number is.
That's not Find My iPhone right
there. That would be mine. Caught red-handed. And I'm going to output my decimal. So if I run it, hopefully no errors. Oh, enter my decimal, 3.6. 3.6666. Oops. Ooh. I think because let's run it again. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So you guys can get those doubles. Now if you want to do 2. So folks, maybe you say, hey, computer, enter a decimal. It does that. Then you might ask your user to enter another one. So you might say enter another decimal. I'm going to create another variable, double, maybe D2 for my second. It's going to be use the same scanner, SD, next, double. And I'm going to maybe do some kind of calculation. So system, that out, that print line. Sorry, I'll move this up. And I might actually do some kind of calculation where I have D, that's my first double, times D2. That's my second double that I'm asking for. And I'll print it out. So you can do multiple inputs. So this would be my first. And this would be my second input. All right. With little time left, if you have questions, you can send me screenshots. It helps if you guys send me a whole screenshot of your code or your with your errors. It's hard for me to know what your error is if I don't see your code. And if you can't do that, you can, some people have copied and pasted their whole code and then sent a screenshot of their errors. That works too, I think. Otherwise, you guys can submit your practice and then send me an email and say, I submitted it, so can you take a look, and then I can resubmit or unsubmit it later, but up to you. There's multiple ways to do this. You will have no homework. So anything that I posted as due today will not be due. We will talk tomorrow. And then some of the assignments, I'm not going to have you guys do all those assignments on Wednesday, Thursday. That's a lot of work. So.
But don't forget the quizzes tomorrow.
Quizzes tomorrow. Yep. Quizzes tomorrow. There's a study guide. If you have any questions, I know we didn't really get to it. If you have any questions, you can email me. It will be, you are allowed to use your notes, but you can't use like Repellent. So if it asks you to do kind of like, hey, what would be the output of your code? You should be able to kind of read some code and know what would be the output. So if you're not going to have this stuff, so don't worry about input, output. You're going to have output, but you're not going to have where you're asking the user to input something. So the stuff that we did yesterday and today will not be on the quiz. And I'll be available tomorrow, so if you had questions, you could always ask. And if you're missing any assignments, please get those in. You don't want to wait too long to get those in. Yep. I was
missing a couple stuff I submitted to you last week.
Okay. Oh, I can tell you right now what's wrong with your code, Darren.
What?
Okay, see where it says string my input equals S next line? The S, you want to make an R because your scanner you named R.
Oh, R?
Yep, because you declared it scanner R. So where you have S.next line, you want it to be an R.next line.
That's still saying it's wrong.
Nope, that should be my input system. That it says that part is wrong for strings.
Yes.
Yeah, it keeps giving us the same error. How about the screenshot of those errors? They are a scanner, one error.
Okay. Don't use, maybe instead of, do you have R somewhere else?
I don't, not in this assignment.
Okay, scanner.
But we could try something that says R.
Instead of R, use S. Let me see. So like for scanner, do scanner S equals new scanner. And then keep the string my input equals S.next line. Oh, and I know what's wrong with next line. It needs to be capital L for line. I think that should be, that could be what you were having an error too. Next line, the L might have not been capitalized.
All right, I think it's good.
Okay. I know, it's tough to remember what needs to be capitalized and what doesn't. Awesome. Okay, guys, don't forget, you have a quiz tomorrow. So I would suggest take a look at the study guide. That's going to be a huge help. Have any questions? Email me.
She wants to see what
I did this on, I came in this on the wrong way. I did this A31.
we did it in the group. Well, she saw your stuff too. She just helped you. She just did doubles one. Okay, well, you can see it. Go share your screen. Bye.
Okay, bye guys. If you have any questions, let me know. My computer's actually gonna die, so I will talk to you guys tomorrow. And then Ms. Spoolhoff will be all set, I think, for tomorrow for this class. And I will talk to you later this afternoon.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, okay, bye.